America hasn't had a president in almost 4 years. Check it out, leave your comments, and make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. But as the nation convulsed, the White House went dark. Last night, or going from the time that this article was written anyway. Last night, as protesters convulsed Washington D.C., the White House went dark. All the lights were off. The windows of the squatters' official residence were dark, and the floodlights outside were extinguished. The country is sick, angry, and divided, but it also finds itself leaderless. 45 has never shown any inclination or ability to soothe or console in moments of crisis. He wants the trappings of power, like showing up for a rocket launch, but he doesn't want to get his hands dirty with the work of governing. And he continues to view himself as the squatter only of the minority who voted for him, not all Americans. These tendencies have converged in this moment. Yesterday, when America needed real leadership, the office of the squatter stood dark and vacant. It is not that 45 has been silent, far from it. His Twitter feed has been a supercharged version of its normal self. 45 has attacked Joe Biden, slurred reporters, insulted leaders on the front lines of protest, and claimed federal authority he doesn't have. This is the sort of behavior we'd call unhinged from any other squatter, but the world has lost any power through its endlessness. Justified invocation throughout his tenure. In any case, the tweeting suggests a squatter flailing around for a message that sticks and for a sense of control. But what has been missing is any sort of behavior traditionally associated with the squattancy. 45 initially condemned George Floyd's killing by a Minneapolis police officer, but since then there have been no statements intended to quell anger. Bridge divisions or Hill wounds. There have been no public appearances either. 45 traveled all the way to Florida to watch a SpaceX rocket launch during that time, but hasn't managed to travel in front of the cameras for a formal statement. During a teleconference on Monday, 45 derided governors as weak in the response to protests, but he has cowered out of view, dithering about what to accept for armchair quarterbacking those who are trying. As the colleague Pat Nichols notes, even Richard Nixon went to speak with anti-Vietnam protesters in 1970, trying to convey that he heard their complaints. It's hard to imagine 45 doing something like that because he has shown no interest in being perceived as caring about what his critics believe. As the person noted in the closing days of the 2018 midterm race, the challenge of a Democratic polity is that leaders must run on behalf of one party, the govern on behalf of everyone. In a one party state, there's no such what they call divided polity, and that's what 45 seems to prefer. His lack of interest in unifying Americans has been on display over the past 3 years. Despite the vacuum that 45's silence creates, practically no one wants to hear from him, which I don't either. They know that he will only make the situation worse, which he always does, whether by intention or when the looting starts, the shooting starts, or just by clumsiness. People may yearn for a leader, but they don't yearn for him. I don't either. Yeah. He should just stop talking. This is like Charlottesville all over again, said Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, said on CNN, referring to 45's disastrous comments at their violent white nationalist march in Virginia of 2017. He speaks and he makes it worse. There are times when you should just be quiet, and I wish that he would just be quiet. It isn't just Democratic leaders like Bottoms who are saying that. His own aides agree. They wish he'd just stop tweeting, and while there are sporadic calls for 45 to make an Oval Office address, the prevailing view among his advisors, led by his dumbass son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is that such an address would be unwise. These staffers remember that 45's March Oval Office address on the coronavirus was full of errors and a political loser. Like Bottoms, they see a parallel with Charlottesville and worry that 45 would just make things worse again. They're almost certainly right. 45 is unable to analyze any issue outside the lens of electoral politics, or more precisely, his own political fortunes. When the New York Times asked 45 yesterday what he was going to do to address unrest, he replied, "I'm going to win the election easily. The economy is going to start to get good and then great, which it won't. Better than ever before. I'm getting more judges appointed by the week, including 2 Supreme Court judges, and I'll have to close 300 by the end of the year." If 45's goal is to maximize his political advantage in this moment, Haig could demonstrate leadership in ways other than giving a speech. As Adam Nagorny points out, a well-timed appearance like Bill Clinton's visit to a riot-stricken Los Angeles in 1992 can help make a campaign. Some 45 aides are reportedly encouraging listening sessions, although no one who's watched 45 in action can possibly imagine him earnestly listening and learning something, or getting through such an excuse without a gaffe. Biden, 45's presumptive Democratic opponent, has also been notably quiet, only cautiously venturing out of the isolation in his house in Wilmington, Delaware. Nothing in 45's statement to the Times touches the demonstrations or shows even a rudimentary understanding of what has inspired them. The paper reports that aides repeatedly have tried to explain to him that the protests were not only about him, but about broader systemic issues related to race. Unsurprisingly, 45, who has a long history of racist behavior and comments, has not warmed to that explanation. Instead, he had gravitated towards conspiracy theories. Yesterday, he tweeted that he would designate Antifa a familiar rhetorical target as a terrorist organization, even though he has no federal authority to do so. He also blamed outside agitators for unrest, a claim debunked by his own allies at a national review. It seems true that there are some violent protesters trying to stir up trouble, but they are plainly neither the starting point nor the majority of those marchers. In short, 45 has no plan to reach out to anyone who doesn't already agree with him about Antifa. He has no notions about how to pacify their protests, and he's in denial about what is causing them. He also may be in denial about his electoral prospects. The case that the protests helped 45 is simple enough. Voters see chaos and gravitate toward a strongman over a warm, fuzzy Democrat. But it's hard to run credibly as a law and order candidate when your 4 years in the presidency have been nothing but repeated chaos, violence, and disorder from Charlotte to Pittsburgh, El Paso to Dayton, and Parkland to Minneapolis. Nixon was able to use that playbook in 1968 when he was running as an outsider, but not as an incumbent. Nonetheless, the election was the top of 45's mind on Monday morning. He delivered an incoherent anti-Biden message and tweeted triumphantly about surely the first. As he tweeted about a new ABC News Washington Post poll, surely the first time a sitting squatter has boasted about a poll showing him trailing by 10 points. Another tweet was older still. The date is election day, of course. 45 presumably means it as a rallying cry for his inbred supporters, but as a reminder to those he doesn't bother to represent, that he doesn't bother to represent too, but of their chance to fill the vacant office of the squatter.